Well, I have been living in the Sermon on the Mount for these last number of weeks. And I've noticed that as Jesus is taking the law and taking us deeper into the law, it's coming alive to me. So a few weeks ago, Jesus says, the problem of the world isn't murder. It's actually the anger and rage of the human heart. And I was like, yes, this is the problem of the world right now. It's the anger that everybody is dealing with. And then last week, Jesus said, it's not just adultery. It's the lust and unwarranted divorces that's destroying your lives. And I was like, yes, this is exactly the problem in the world right now. Lust and seeking after these kinds of sensual pleasures is what's tearing individuals' lives and families apart. Yes, this is the problem of the world. And then today, Jesus says it's not just about lying under oath. It is the lying and deception in all of your hearts. And I am again like, yes, this is the problem of the world in which we live. See, Jesus is speaking to the heart of all of these things that destroy human beings and destroy families and destroy society. What really destroys all nations, all cultures, all families, all individuals? It is the sinful darkness hidden in the human heart. And today we're going to talk about another kind of darkness, this darkness of deception. And Jesus is calling to be people of the truth. So we're going to look at Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 33 through 37. And we've covered the first 3 of 6 statements where Jesus says, you've heard it said, and he quotes the law, and he says, but I say. And so this is number 4 this week. And then the next time we're together, we'll cover the final 2 statements in chapter 5. So Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 33, the words of Jesus. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, and do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. And this is the word of the Lord. Well, let's talk about today. We're going to talk about making oaths. We're going to talk about the destruction of lies. And finally, we're going to talk about the freedom of truth. So first, let's talk about making oaths. This law that Jesus cites is specifically about making oaths. So on the face value, Jesus says this. He says, do not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take oaths at all, either by heaven or by the throne of God or by earth or footstool or the king. Or he even says, even by your own head, because you can't control like what hairs are black and what hairs are white, which I've been getting a lot of comments since getting my hair cut short that people have noticed that I'm getting a lot of gray hair. And I know Jesus is saying I can't control it. It's just something that happens. And so Jesus is saying, do not make oaths. And it sounds like this command is just on its face value of like, we should never make promises by God or by heaven or by our own children or by our own head. Well, let's go a little deeper. What is an oath? What is an oath? An oath basically is making a promise with some sort of strong consequence. So in the ancient world, this is a pretty common thing. People would say, look, I swear that I am telling the truth, and if I am lying, may God strike me down. I'm promising you that this is true. And if so, there's a big consequence. Like God may strike me down if what I am telling you is a lie. It's a way of saying, really listen to the promise I'm making. And I think most people do this. Like, sometimes I bend the truth a little bit. But right now, I swear by God that I am telling the truth. Like, you should believe me now, even though some of the time I might not be telling the truth. And so there are laws in the Old Testament. And the law that Jesus is speaking is specifically about when you make an oath, this is serious, serious business, and you need to follow through. And it's really not that different than today. You know, it is not a crime in our culture to tell a lie. It's not a crime. And in fact, as I know this, as I meet with people, sometimes people lie to me. And when people lie to me, I don't call Police Chief Sand down the street. I don't call him up and say, so-and-so from my congregation just lied to me. Can you go throw them in jail or, at least write them a ticket and give them a fine or something because they shouldn't lie? Well, I would never do that, right? Because we know that you can lie and you don't face jail time for lying. You don't get fined for lying. But there is a case when you actually can face jail time or a fine. And it is this. It is when you lie under oath. This is the crime of perjury. And in fact, this is like so common in American courts. You think about this. People in the American judicial system will often, before testifying, they will place a hand on the Bible. Now, it's not required to place your hand on the Bible, but it's so interesting that this is so much a part of who we are. Place a hand on the Bible, raise your hand, and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. This is an oath. I may lie a bunch in my life. I may be very deceptive, but right now, I'm going to tell the truth. And when you are under oath, if you tell intentional lies, and it can be proven, there can be great criminal penalties for this. Perjury is a real crime. But most of the time when we lie, you don't face any criminal consequences. Not in America and not in ancient Israel, unless you make an oath. Now, on face value, this passage seems to be, Jesus seems to be telling us that we should just, as Christians, never make an oath and that we should never promise by anything at all. And there are some Christians who take this passage like at face value, very literally, and they believe just like Christians should never make an oath. So groups like Anabaptists, so you think of like modern day Quakers, you think of Mennonites and Amish, they believe this, that Christians should never make an oath. Now, we do in culture sometimes make oaths. Now, wedding vows are kind of like an oath, but that's not quite specifically the case of the technical language of an oath here. But there are times, as a pastor, when I was ordained into the ministry, I made an oath before God and before the leadership of the church to fulfill certain duties. Military service, people entering into military make an oath. You think of anybody sworn into office, you think of the President of the United States. He makes an oath when he comes into his office. And it is a promise before God and before people to do certain duties. And so some Christians just say like, Christians should never, ever make an oath. So this is one of the reasons why modern day Anabaptists don't serve in the military. It's not the only reason, but it is a reason. Now, I don't think that's what Jesus's point here is. I think Jesus is actually taking us deeper. And we see this in the Old Testament. God himself makes an oath. In Genesis chapter 22, verse 15, after Abraham went to sacrifice his son Isaac, it says this in chapter 22, verse 15. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven, and he said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. And then he makes some more promises. But you hear the language? God says, by myself I'll make an oath. So as people say, I swear I'm telling the truth, or God will strike me down, God himself says, I'm going to make you a promise, and I'm swearing by my own name. In Psalm 132, verse 11, it says, the Lord swore to David a sure oath from which he will not turn back. One of the sons of your body I will set on your throne. This is the messianic promise. This is the oath that God makes to David. So I don't think oaths are necessarily wrong because God himself makes them. And then in the law, in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 21 to 22, it's a law regarding oaths. It says this, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of a sin. So there's Old Testament law, like saying how serious oaths are. See, Jesus's point here is not just never make an oath. If you look at this, all of these passages, he looks at the law and then he takes us deeper to the heart of the law. So he's not just saying like, don't worry about oaths. His point is this: in your heart, in your mind, always speak the truth. He says, let your yes be yes and your no be no always. Be a person who simply speaks the truth. See, the point of this passage isn't to it's just not to never make promises. Jesus isn't saying don't ever make a promise. His point is you shouldn't have to promise. You should always speak the truth regardless, whether you're under oath or not. People who know you should know that you are a person who always speaks the truth. You can be trusted. Now, there may be occasions where we take an oath, we make an oath, when people don't know us, or there's some sort of obligation. And the commandment that Jesus is really speaking to is, you shall not bear false witness. And here's the reality. You should not bear false witness when you are under oath because there are criminal consequences to that. But you shouldn't bear false witness at any time. Jesus is telling us to always speak the truth, whether you make a promise or not. So we talked about making oaths. Let's talk about the destruction of lying. The destruction of lies. What happens to us when we lie? Well, first, let me talk about what truth is. What is truth? I mean, it's a weird thing to define. Truth is when my words, what I communicate, matches reality. When what I say, when what I communicate corresponds with what truly is. That's what truth is. But when we lie, we are not concerned with what is, what reality is. We have some other motivation. Often we lie to gain something. 3 examples of what we try to gain when we lie are we try to gain power, or we try to gain peace, or we try to gain prestige. These aren't exclusive, these aren't the only motivations, but I think these cover some of the deeper heart issues. So think about this. Sometimes we lie because we want power. We're motivated by power. I want things to happen my way, so I say things in order to get other people to do what I want them to do. And I often communicate with subtle control and manipulate to get things that I want because I want things to happen my way. And we bend to the truth because we're motivated by control and power. Some of the time we're motivated by peace. Sounds like a good thing to be motivated by. And I don't want to rock the boat. I hate conflict. So I might deceive. I might not say the truth. I might twist things because I want everybody to get along and I don't want there to be conflict. And so I subtly twist the truth. I'm just twisting things because I don't want to hurt people's feelings, which it sounds so nice. Just small little lies because I want peace. Another motivation, prestige. I want to look good. I want people to think that I'm pretty good. So I communicate in order to present a certain image. And the image might not be fully true, but I want to look good. I mean, this is what you and I know about social media is it's all false. And why is it false? Because it's all about looking good. But we all know it's fake, right? You can see right through it. It's all about image. And people don't actually tell you the reality of what's going on in their lives. They paint this perfect image. I see people like, I went on this amazing trip and look at my amazing photos with my amazing husband and my amazing children. And it all looks so pristine. But you and I know what's really going on, right? We know that on this trip, the kids bickered and fought in the backseat like the whole way. I know that you're actually going on this vacation to distract yourself from the fact that your marriage isn't really good. It's actually falling apart, which is why you're on a vacation, to try to distract yourself from that, maybe to help save the marriage. And actually, in reality, your life is quite boring and you're dissatisfied with your life, but you've got a great photo to fool us all on social media. Congratulations. It's all about prestige. And this is what motivates us when we lie. It's about gaining power or peace or prestige or some other motivation. And we don't communicate what is true, what is really going on. We're dishonest. And I think we do this all the time in the way we communicate. We subtly bend the truth. We don't like to say we're lying or we say white lies. We just twist things. And it's all corrupt. I mean, think about the silly stereotype, okay? Here's a good question for you. And this is a silly stereotype, but I think you'll know where I'm coming from. When a wife asks her husband, quote, "Do I look fat in this dress?" unquote, the great moral question is, how are you supposed to answer that? Should the husband answer honestly if he doesn't really like the dress? I mean, if he thinks like she's not very attractive in this dress, what should he say? What do you think? Here's my answer. I think you should speak the truth. I know that sounds terrible, right? Like, Tristan, are you really saying that? But here's my question. If you ask the question, do I look good in this dress? Do you really want to know the truth? Or are you fishing for compliments? We are, as Christians, supposed to speak the truth and to do it in love. But let me just give you a window into my own heart. This question of, do I look fat in this dress, is very similar to a question that a lot of times I will ask Jill, my wife, on Sunday afternoons. And I will say, "Hun, was that sermon as bad as I thought it was?" Let's be real, right? Am I wanting her to be honest with me? Or am I just speaking out of my own insecurity? You know, I want Jill to say, "Tristan, it was amazing. You're such a great communicator. You're such a wonderful pastor." And I'm getting patted on the back, right? Do I really want the truth? Well, I've learned that I actually do want the truth. So some of the time I will ask Jill and I will say, "I felt like that sermon wasn't really good." Like right now, like I'm rambling a lot, right? Was that sermon good? And Jill has learned to do this, to speak the truth, but to do it in love. She doesn't kill me, but she'll say, like, there were a couple points that weren't real clear, but I thought this was good, but you kind of lost me on this. But, I thought it was okay. And she'll honestly engage. And I've learned that I really want the truth. I don't just want compliments, because compliments feed my ego, but the truth pushes me to grow. We need the truth in love. But most of us spend a lot of our life with little subtle manipulating ways of communicating. And all of these little white lies, all of these tiny things that we think are so innocent, bring destruction in time. Here's what lying does. Lying splits the person in two. It divides the person in half. It creates a double life. When I am motivated over here by power and prestige and peace and my other things that I'm trying to gain, I'm actually using words and communication to get what I want, to bend truth for my own sake. I create a false self. But then I still want there to be a true self. And so over here, like, I'm going to tell the truth. And at least in these areas, I speak the truth and I'm an honest person. But over here, I'm not. Here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, be a whole person. Don't divide yourself into two halves. Don't in one way be saying all these things that are subtly manipulative and you twist the truth and all these things. But over here, when you're under oath, you'll speak the truth. He's saying, no, be a person at all times who always speaks the truth. And don't try to justify these little white lies, these little ways of manipulating reality, because it always brings destruction. Whether you're under oath or not, lying and deception will destroy your life. It will destroy your family. It will ultimately destroy culture. It will destroy the world. All these little ways of manipulating the truth, twisting and deceiving, bring about total destruction. Little lies really aren't so little. Little ways of manipulating destroy everything. Let me give you a practical example. Let's talk about family. Here's a question. Do I ever say untrue things to my children? Do I ever lie to my children? And here's the honest answer. Yes, I do. Actually, quite frequently. I almost every day say absurdly untrue things to my children. And here's my rule in my household. We tease a lot. And my teasing is always so grandiose and absurd in my sarcasm, in my joking, that all of my lies are not little white manipulations. They are giant, absurd lies. I'll give you a couple examples. Some of the time my children will say something like, hey, when is mommy getting back from the store? And I'll say something like, well, she should be back at least within the next month. Which actually is technically true because she, within a month, she's going to be there in a half hour. Or some of the time I'll say I'm a terrible, terrible father. This is full confession to you. I will say things like, well, she may not ever come back. She probably has gone out and found a better family with better children. So we may never see her again. And whenever I say these things, I know that's awful, isn't it? I also say things like this. Whenever I'm talking with my children, I'll say like, this is why you are by far my favorite child of all the kids. You're the best. And anytime I say these things, my children notoriously roll their eyes at me and say, Daddy. And why? Because they know I'm just saying crazy, absurd, giant, teasing lies. And I say them in a way so they know that I'm not telling the truth. But it's funny, some of the time, especially with the little girls, maybe last year when Lucy was pretty young, some of the time I would say something like, Lucy, that's why you're my favorite. And she would actually get concerned and she'd say like, Daddy, really? And it's funny, she doesn't want me to think that she doesn't want to think that she is my favorite. And the reason is, if my love is based on like conditions, if it can be earned, if she knows that she's reached the pinnacle, that I love her the most, she's recognizing that actually she could lose my love. So actually my kids don't like it if they actually thought seriously that I loved them more than their sisters and Elijah. But there was a couple times where she's like, seriously, Daddy? And I'm like, of course not. Like, no, like I'm not being serious. And so like my kids now have learned my sense of sarcasm. So they just roll their eyes all the time. But here's the thing, right? I'm not always serious. I like to tease, and my teasing is absurd. And never cutting. Like we should never be cutting in our sarcasm and in our joking. We should never be cruel and manipulative. But here's the bigger problem. The little subtle lies in the family. Hey kids, I'm busy right now, but I'll spend time with you tomorrow. Because the kids are frustrating, and they're just kids. And I'm going to blow them off. But tomorrow comes, and you don't spend any time with them. You make little subtle promises and just don't follow through. And kids pick up on this. Hey, tomorrow I'll spend time with you, but I don't have time right now. And the kid knows like you're just blowing them off. And the kid's like, well, do you promise, Daddy? Yeah, I promise. But it's just a kid. I don't really need to follow through. I don't really need to be accountable to my children. And we don't follow through, and we twist the truth. And I just want to say this, the battle of the world is being waged in those little lies. Those little, I'm not really lying. I'm just, I just forgot. I didn't follow through. Yeah, well, you're never going to be criminally prosecuted for manipulating and subtly lying to your children. But you will slowly lose your children. You will destroy their hearts. These little white lies bring deep destruction. Because it's so easy to manipulate the truth. Just not follow through. Just say a little thing to gain an advantage here, to avoid a conflict there. But all of it brings destruction. And Jesus says, let your yes be yes. And your no, no. Use plain, simple language. Be a person of integrity who always tells the truth. And even when you can't tell the truth, here's a good rule of thumb: just be quiet. Jordan Peterson is this clinical psychologist who I've followed quite a bit, and I've read his book, 12 Rules for Life. It's interesting. He's not a Christian, but he has a lot of values and principles that really line up with truth and the Christian faith. And he wrote a chapter in his book called Tell the Truth. This is one of his rules for life. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie, which I kind of like, right? Because to never lie doesn't mean that we have to say every single thing that ever comes through our minds. Like the purpose of telling the truth doesn't mean just to say everything all the time that is true. But Peterson's point is like, well, at least don't lie. So some of the time the antidote to lying is just to be silent and to not say everything. Like some of the time there's true things that could be said, but you just don't need to say them. And this is true. The Bible tells us this. Proverbs 29:11 says this: a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds back. That's a lot of wisdom, right? And again, Proverbs 17:28 says, even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. So even a fool, if he's quiet, seems to be a lot smarter than he is. James chapter 1, verse 19 says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And then lastly, quote Will Rogers, not in the Bible, but maybe it should be. He said, quote, never miss a good chance to shut up, unquote. That's good, right? I mean, some of the time we just need to be silent. In fact, there's a problem in our world right now. Nobody trusts the media. Nobody trusts anybody on social media. And I think one of the reasons is because it seems like everybody has an agenda. It's really hard to tell who is telling the truth. And there are all these like subtle ways that people lie. One of the things that I've noticed, especially when it comes to media and social media, is that everybody speaks with absolute certainty. And this is a subtle way of lying. They will say things like, absolutely, this is the way it is. If you don't believe me, you're wrong. And I see this. This is true with COVID-19 right now. I think it's a problem. And I see it on both sides because people speak with such absolute certainty. So some will say, if we don't stay locked down, or if you don't follow my rules, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die. Or I know that if we follow this plan of action, this is the way to keep everybody safe. And then on the other side, I see people saying like, all the lockdown is completely government control and manipulation. It's all a conspiracy. And both sides, I always am like, do you really, really know that? Like, how certain are you of these things that you're saying? Because what I find with this whole situation is that nobody really knows everything. There's so much complication to what's going on. And the people that I find the most trustworthy are people who are modest and reasonable and who approach all of this looking at all the factors that are going on and say like, okay, there's problems economically, there's problems socially, there's problem with the sickness and the virus. We should take all these things into consideration. And frankly, nobody fully knows because it's so complicated. But in our arrogance, in our self-grandiose certainty, we lie. We say that we know things that we don't truly know. It's a subtle way of twisting the truth. And these subtle overstatements, these little ways of breaking trust, these little things we do in relationships all the time are so destructive. These little ways we lie undermine our lives, undermine our family, undermine even society. See, we have a pandemic of anger. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. We have a pandemic of lust. Talked about that last week. We have a pandemic of deception. And these are the things that are destroying our lives and our world. Let me quote Jordan Peterson. This is a longer quote, but I think it's really helpful. And again, he's not a Christian, but listen to how really gospel-centered this is. He says this: first, a little lie. Then, several little lies to prop it up. After that, distorted thinking to avoid the shame that those lies produce. Then a few more lies to cover up the consequences of the distorted thinking. Then, most terribly, the transformation of those now necessary lies through practice into autonomized, specialized, structural, neurologically instantiated unconscious beliefs and actions. He's a clinical psychologist. I know there's some big words there. Basically saying you start to believe your own lies, and then you become the lie itself. Then to continue his quote, he says, if you don't believe in brick walls, you will still be injured when you run headlong into one. Then you will curse reality itself for producing the wall. After that comes the arrogance and sense of superiority that inevitably accompanies the production of successful lies. The person thinks, everyone is fooled. So everyone is stupid except me. Everyone is stupid and fooled by me, so I can get away with whatever I want. That's when things fall apart. That's the chaos of the underworld emerging like a flood, like a flood to subsume familiar ground. But it's not yet hell. Hell comes later. Hell comes when lies have destroyed the relationship between the individual and reality itself. Things fall apart. Life degenerates. Everything becomes frustration and disappointment. Hope consistently betrays. The deceitful individual desperately gestures at sacrifice like Cain, but fails to please God. Then the drama enters its final act. Tortured by constant failure, the individual becomes bitter. Disappointment and failure amalgamate and produce a fantasy. The world is bent on my personal suffering, my particular undoing, my destruction. I deserve, I must have my revenge. That is the gateway to hell. Peterson is not a professing Christian, but that is profoundly true of the sinful nature. It starts with these little lies, and these little lies degenerate everything and destroy us from the inside out until it's hell. This is the destruction that comes from deception. Well, we've talked about making oaths, we've talked about the destruction of lies. Let's conclude with the freedom of truth. There is freedom in speaking the truth. Jesus says, let your yes be yes. That's all. That's all you need. Here's what I've learned a long time ago. It is exhausting trying to hide the truth. When I used to mess up, make a big mistake, felt like super embarrassed by something, I would always try to hide it. No, I don't want anybody to find this out. I don't want anybody to see how foolish I am. And I would scheme and hide things. And I'll tell you what, it's exhausting. And then I ended up being found out in my foolishness. And then you look even worse, right? Because you've been hiding it. And I've learned over time that when I mess up big time, to run into accountability, to run towards disclosing my big mess up. And this is a profound truth of the Christian faith. Christian confession is freeing. When I have sinned, when I fail, when I mess up, I should run to Christ and run to a brother or sister and fully take responsibility. There is freedom in confession. Think about what is confession? Confession is communicating the truth about our sin, about our brokenness. And we know this. We know this even from common culture. There is an expression, the cover-up is worse than the crime. Why is that worse than the crime? Because it wasn't just the issue itself. It's all the manipulation and deceiving and hiding the actual crime itself. The cover-up becomes worse. And it is exhausting to lie and hide and manipulate. And there is a freedom when we just embrace the truth and communicate it freely. Here is the beautiful mystery. The truth is not just this abstract thing. The truth is actually personified. God is the God of truth. And Christ, the eternally begotten Son of God, claimed that he is the truth. John's gospel really brings this out. Jesus is on trial before Pilate. And in chapter 18 of John's gospel, there's this dialogue. Pilate said to Jesus, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Pilate foreshadows the despair of the modern world. Nobody knows truth. What is truth? All truth is relative. And all we're left with when all truth is done away with is power and manipulation. But Jesus tells us another way. In John chapter 4, earlier in the gospel, he says the famous quote, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I am the truth. You will find truth not just abstractly out there. You will find it in knowing me. And then Jesus' words going back in the Gospel of John, John chapter 8. "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And this is the greatest truth. See, the greatest truth that we can enter into is to confess, to speak our own sin, our own lostness, our own brokenness. We can speak the truth that I don't have all the answers, that I don't know everything, that I am just a mere mortal and I am hopeless unless there is a God. And I trust that he is there, and I confess my reality to him. And he meets me there. So our call is to stop running, to stop manipulating, to stop the subtle twisting, to stop the promises that we never follow through on, to stop trying to control everything and being manipulated by all these other motivations, and to come to the God of all truth, to proclaim our own deception, our own lies, our own sinfulness, our own brokenness, and to be set free by the God of all truth. It is so freeing to know him, to be known by him, to be truly free. This is the way Jesus is calling us. He's calling us into the way that is his life. Come to him